Bartley up for a prayer, please.
Let us pray. Father, we just thank you for the blessings of this day. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather together to conduct the business of this county. We just pray you be with us as we make the decisions, that we can do the best for all. Father, we're so thankful for our first responders, our sheriff deputies, our firefighters, our emergency service personnel for their dedication to this county and the work they do. We just continue to pray that they have safety as they perform those duties to keep us all safe. Father, again, we just ask you to be with us as we deliberate the issues of this county. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, and so let me kind of lay out how I think we would be efficient in proceeding. We're here, of course, about wage adjustments in departments, Sheriff's Department, jail, Clerk's Department, Clerk's Office. What I want to do is I'll give just a brief opening, give each department 5 to 10 minutes if they wish to have what? Oh, I need to call roll. Okay, let's call roll.
Commissioner Bartleman.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Parker.
Here.
Judge Clymer.
Here. So if you want to give a opening for a small presentation, do so. If you don't. We do have written numbers from each department along with a narrative explaining them, that sort of thing. So we're, I think, abreast of what the issues are. I would also, after we do any presentations, if there are any, Steve Doolittle has presented a presentation as to revenue and abilities to, or lack thereof, to give wage increases at certain levels, that sort of thing. Part of it would be then go to a discussion as to whether we feel we need a revenue increase to fund any wage increases, and then a discussion of what wage adjustments we believe are appropriate at what levels and what departments. So as far as, before we get to those presentations, as I guess most everybody knows in this room, I come from a law enforcement background, have a bachelor's degree in law enforcement, a graduate of the academy, worked in law enforcement for 9 years, city and county. And so I have a particular interest in this, particularly as to the Sheriff's Department. And I'll tell you that one of my primary goals when I got into this office was to adjust the Sheriff's Department wages upward where they needed to be. I didn't have the details, the ins and outs of what the police made. I did work for the Paducah Police, and I worked for what used to be called the County Police, a different division from what the Sheriff's Department was. But so you have aspirations and hopes and desires to do things, and then I took the office and I see what the condition of the budget was, and I immediately recognized that we need to create some revenue, and this body has done that. We have created some revenue for various things. In my mind, what we have done has been needed to be done for decades and not done, and so that's why we were in a hole and we're climbing out of that hole. The bottom line, I think, is that none of the four of us need to be explained that there is a need for wage increases. Certainly won't hear what you have to say, but we don't have to be convinced. Not a one of us thinks that there is no need for wage increases. The challenge, if you're going to pay an obligation, create an obligation, create a debt, we have to have a source to fund that. And so we either create new or we find somewhere in the budget to do that. And so that's going to be the challenge. Not that we need to, but how to. So we've got, I see, where is the sheriff? Oh, there you are. And the sheriff, you said you had about a 5-minute video or something, and then whatever you want to say, well, go ahead.
I'll just start. I'll let the video be the ending. I know that you all have
Over here, is that where it's going to be?
Yes, yes.
Okay. We might need to move around to see that, some of us anyway, but go ahead.
There is, I'm just going to take 2 or 3 minutes to open and let the video be the closing. I've written you all a letter. I've given you some information. I know that you've got our figures. A few points that I think is worth repeating just to make sure that you do understand the gravity that we are facing here. There's 5 deputies that could retire today before the day's end. There's a total of 10, which totals 15 that could retire within the next 2 years. And where that's so important to understand for the public safety is the amount of time that it takes to get a deputy trained, which is around 2 years. We've got 27 deputy sheriffs that have secondary employment to help supplement their income. It is, we recently lost a 6-year deputy that was one of our FDOs over to another agency, making about $11,000 more annually, which I believe is imperative to remind you that to compress a pay scale, if anything can be done, it's very important to not compress that. Everybody is aware that in the hazardous duty retirement, the high 3 is what people are focused on. And if we compress that or not take care of these guys that have got several years in, then we're going to subject ourselves for them to look for that high 3 elsewhere, and to get that high 3 elsewhere if we don't take care of them also. One figure that I would remind you of is today, or as of 2022, if you began 7 blocks down the road compared to right here at the sheriff's office, in 25 years, there's about a $385,000 difference in what you're going to gross and what you're going to pay. You all know the pros and the cons in terms of comparison with the amount of coverage that we have as far as in the county, 268 square miles with very limited deputies, very few deputies. So several wanted to have a voice here today. So in lieu of time and respecting your all's time, which I appreciate you putting this workshop together to hear this, I would just ask that you focus your attention on a video that's been put together by several people just to kind of give an overview of what we can deal with or are subject to deal with at any given time. Yes, sir.
Can you turn the TV so we can?
Yeah, we're going to turn it. I'll play that. That's all I have. Outside of, I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
must be a minister, a social worker, a diplomat, a tough guy, and a gentleman. And of course, he'll have to be a genius because he'll have to feed a family on a policeman's salary.
All right, anything else from the sheriff at this time?
I don't know, again, you all have everything that I know you need to make a educated decision. I'll answer any questions that you've got.
If you could speak a little more to the high three, I think I've got a feeling on the low, the high three.
Well,
I understand the concept that they'll
sure.
want to get a high three somewhere else, but where do
you,
we need to be on the high three? That's what I don't.
well, again, I would submit to you that for whatever figure can be determined that can go towards our office, that, the chart that you all were provided, that has got everything broke down. As you can tell, I've got people that may get a couple $1 an hour raise and people that could get $8 an hour raise just to keep the percentages across the board correct. And that's where I stand, that we cannot just fix this at the front end. This is not just a hiring problem. This is across the board problem. I don't want to leave one single person within that agency out. I just want whatever raises can be applied, that they be applied equally and fairly. I think Mr. Doolittle years ago come up with a great lead-in pay scale plan. One of the problems with that, respectfully, is we kind of drop off after 4 years. We've got a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 3, a grade 4, but there's not really anything in place for a grade 5 through 20 or 25. So I feel like that whatever figure is that we come up with, that you all come up with, that you can provide, that we've got to, I would just ask for a seat at the table to help disperse that fairly and not leave anyone out, because no one deserves to be left out.
But you're still sticking to what you said as earlier in your projections as far as what you would do with the money and how you would disperse it.
Which projection are you referring to?
When we got an email from you and which I come over, we got a hard copy.
Oh, talking about the chart?
Right.
Yes, the charts where we broke down 10, 20,
Right.
30, all the way up to 100%, yes. And you can glance at that and see the difference. We've got people, one particular deputy right now that's about $18,000 behind of where he could be elsewhere. And we've got some that's only, $6,000 behind where they could be elsewhere. But I just can't stress enough that we can't compress that in the middle. That will not be fair and that will not work. Right now is the most imperative time, if there's ever been a time, to have the most seasoned, trained officers out there that we can. And we can't afford to not be able to hire new ones, but we also can't afford to be able to lose what we have.
Okay. Sheriff, what would your reaction be if we were to do a fairly quick increase of those, say, under $20 an hour, and then beginning with the next fiscal year, then we start to address everybody else to try to get those lower paid up and the starting pay, and then adjust some of the higher salaried people maybe the next fiscal year?
I would be open to at least discuss any possible improvement. Again, I just don't want to leave anyone out indefinitely. I think that we probably have got the type of men and women working here that, for ones that have been here longer, making a little more, would probably even be in favor of that. But as long as there was a projection or a plan, knowing what's to come, and that's the biggest thing I'm asking for, is a plan. I think that if without hope, you don't have anything. So if there is legitimate hope that there is a plan in place. I know that a lot of these numbers cannot and won't be achieved overnight. I recognize that. But for 2 years we've spoke of this, and I just want to, I'm begging that some plan go into place that would work, that we could project out so that these men and women know as they look forward that there is hope around the corner.
Before we go to the jail, let me just ask you this, Sheriff. If it becomes apparent that these raises cannot be given at a significant level without generating income, that means taxing, will the Sheriff's Department support a modest tax increase to pay out increased wages for the sheriff?
As I stated in my letter, not being a commissioner or the judge executive to understand fully the county budget. I don't understand it. I've looked at it. I don't know exactly what is and is not available. I would just say this, that if I, speaking as a citizen, if I may, knew what I knew as sheriff, knew what was around the corner, if something didn't give to ensure that I had frontline men and women such as we have sitting in this audience ready to respond, that I would be willing to make small sacrifices to ensure that that didn't go away. And if that is the only option, I absolutely would be for it, if that is the only option. I'm not trying to sidestep the question or not give you a straight answer. I just simply don't know. But if I had no other alternative, and I thought that I was going to lose out on having frontline men and women to respond in the event of an emergency. A lot of times it don't matter to people if they've not been affected by it. But the minute that you are having someone kick in your front door and burglarize your home, it becomes real important to have those men and women. So many people go throughout their whole life and they never have any interaction with law enforcement. So it's not real relevant to them until we're needed. And then when we're needed, there's nothing that would be more relevant. So to answer your question, if that is the absolute only way, I think that the decision's got to be, are we going to decline in the professional service that's provided, or are we going to maintain that, and are we going to have people to respond in the future or not?
Well, and you don't really have to understand the budget to understand that if we have more money, we can pay more wages. I mean, it's as simple as that. It may be, and I'm going to ask Jailer, and I'm going to ask the clerk that same question. It's ultimately on this body. I guess you say it's ultimately on me. I run the ship, and we're all in this together. And so we do have to make the tough decisions, but it's just a fact that can't be denied that we are on a very tight budget. Some of us think it's tighter than others. We're going to discuss that pretty thoroughly, I think, here shortly. But if we have more revenue, certainly we can pay more wages at a higher rate and across and further out. I mean, that's just simple economics. So, so let's go to the jail then.
But you said you were in favor. I missed Commissioner Bertleman's question. You said the deputies would be in favor, and I assume it was a phase-in. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
We handle like the lower income, maybe under $20 an hour immediately, and then a plan to step up others over beginning with the next fiscal year.
I guess I want to make sure, did you say that you think you're in favor of that? Because that didn't sound like what you said in your other presentation. It sounded like to me what you were saying is you wanted a seat at the table in order to figure out where the money should go, as opposed to what Mr. Bertleman said.
And I guess, to be clear, what I would request is, I don't know what dollar amount is going to exist, what that amount's going to be. Whatever that amount turns out to be, that we look at that collectively across the board. I think that there could be more than one approach, more than one option. I don't know what those options are going to be yet, so it's tough to say. But I'm certainly willing to work with you all as I have and believe that we have, and move forward and see what we can do. I'm just asking for us to do the best we can.
Here's what I think you're saying. You want us to come up with a pot of money, and you understand this pot might not be as big as another pot. There may be two pots.
Right.
But when we start dividing up both pot one and pot two, you'd like a seat at the table to figure out how to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question about your current salary schedule. If you hire somebody who has not been to the academy, when they graduate from the academy, do they get a significant pay increase, or?
It's $4,000 that's paid through the state. Yes, then
That's the state incentive. But I mean, I was just wondering if you were to hire, again, somebody who has to go to the academy, and for a year and a half, they go to the academy for a year and they're not really producing any, would they get paid the same salary as if you hired somebody who had been to the academy?
No, not necessarily. I've had some freedoms to present to the fiscal court on a new hire, starting someone off at a grade 1, 2, 3, or 4. So someone that's got, say, 6 to 8 years of experience and is academy certified would certainly start off more than someone that has no experience and not academy certified, based upon the current grade scale that's in the ordinance.
Does your proposed pay schedule, does it have a differentiation between a new hire who has been to the academy and not been to the academy? I guess what I'm asking is, if you can hire somebody at $30,000 a year who has not been to the academy, then when they graduate the academy, they get a bump to some higher salary. Is that an option?
That's
It's kind of like a probationary period. I mean, it's not probation, but.
I mean, that's essentially what's taking place now.
Okay. Okay.
With the 4 grades.
We have not always been starting people at the very bottom. Some of the people we've hired from other agencies, the sheriff's tried to make them lateral.
Right. Okay.
We'll have a lot more questions, I'm sure, as we go through the morning. But I just want to get those initial presentations done, and we do need to focus, I think, first on revenue. If we can get a handle on what amount of money do we have, or at least what the source is, then that'll help us to determine some of these questions. It's kind of like, I guess, going to, the little kid at Christmas thing, or the parents really saying, well, I want to give the kids, all these toys. And, well, how are you going to do it? So let's figure out first what our finances are, our ability to provide toward wages, and then how it can be distributed in which departments and at what level and at what rate and that sort of things. All right, and we've got Jailer here. Do you have something you want to give us, Dave?
I gathered some of the information you all had asked me to put together for you.
Thank you.
I spoke with each of you individually already, so you know most of our numbers. In short, we're 9 people short over there. That's creating a huge overtime problem. Last year we were $20,000 under budget on our overtime. At the current rate we're going with overtime, we're going to be about $56,000 over budget. That's another $76,000 that's going to come out of the budget. I have no choice but to do this. We have to operate a safe facility, as safe as we can make it anyway, and we don't have the manpower to do it. If you look at your back page, we're not competing with other jails. We're competing with Marco's Pizza, who pays the same as we do, except you don't get punched in the face and urine thrown on you for that price. If you look through there, COVID has created a shortage of people wanting to work or can work or willing to work, so that has left a opportunity for many of our employees to go elsewhere to make more money with less hazard, and in many cases better benefits. Out of the 57 employees I have, 46.5% of them, 26, have been there for a year or less. If you break it down a little further, 10 of them have probably been there for 3 months or so. These are the folks that are guarding our murderers, rapists, child molesters. Once they come off the street, they don't disappear. They're still here, and it's our job to maintain the security of the facility and safety of the community. And it's really hard to do that with inexperienced folks. I can train them. I provide them 40 hours of training when I'm only required to give them 24. Training is not going to outweigh experience. We talked about a pay scale where I can compensate new people that come from other facilities that do have experience. Currently, there is no ordinance in place that allows me to do that. Sheriff Carter talked about hope. Our folks have no hope. At $12 an hour, they're looking at 2% a year. That's what they're going to get. And that's why they leave. They see nothing brighter in the future to stay here. And at our last fiscal court meeting, I believe we had 5 quit. We hired 3. That's the typical way things are going. We're losing more than we're gaining. These folks are they are burnt out on working the overtime and dealing with what they have to deal with over there. This environment, which is beyond all of our control, has created unrest amongst the inmates because nobody's moving. All of our programs are shut down. So they're even harder to handle now than they were a year ago. They're challenging enough as it is, but when they can't go anywhere, they don't have programs, they don't get to go out and work, they have nothing else to do but tear up our stuff. We replaced more sprinkler heads in the last 2 months than we did in the last 2 years. And this is what our deputies are dealing with, and they see Menards is paying $1 more than we are. They're going to Menards to push shopping carts. It boils down to, I have to run it as safe as I can run it, and my only control is with the inmate population is to get rid of the inmates that pay. And if I call the state and tell them I want to get rid of 100, I can't tell you they're not going to take 250 of them. So 100 inmates cost us $1.1 million. If we lose them all, then we're going to lose almost 2.8. That's a burden that we're looking at. I mean, I don't want to make the problem worse. I'd rather fix it to where we don't have to deal with that. And I think I went over all of that with most of you. Do y'all have any questions?
Just so that what you're saying is, if you don't feel like you got enough people to run a safe jail, you'll have to reduce inmates. You
Yes,
can't
sir.
really tell the local judges that you're not going to
I have no
take their
control over
inmates.
that.
You'll tell the state you're not going to take their inmates.
If I call them and tell them I safely cannot take care of their inmates, they're going to come get them. That's where we're at. I mean,
And those are the inmates that pay $30, that we get $30 a day.
those are 31, 34 a day. The feds are 45 a day.
Gotcha. All right.
So you heard me, I gave you a heads up on my question.
If you ask me that question and you explain to me as a citizen who knew nothing about this that you can have to increase taxes at 4% and cost me a little bit of money, or if he has to get rid of $2 million worth of inmates, you're going to have to increase taxes that cost me a whole lot of money, I'm going to take the better of the 2 options.
4%.
Fixing the problem is a whole lot better than waiting for there to be a $2 million additional deficit that we're not bringing in. And then you're going to need more than what 4% is going to fix. Nobody likes to pay more taxes, but we also like to live in a safe community. And, those folks don't go away when they bring them to jail. To keep them confined and where they need to be, then I'm willing to pay for that.
Okay. Anything else, Jayla? We'll circle back around on things here in a little bit. But Julie, do you want to provide anything?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay.
You mean here or there?
But just reiterate, before I sit down, we need a scale in place to where these individuals understand that in a year, I'm going to make a little more than I did make last year. And then in 7 years, I'll at least be able to make enough to live on. They don't have that right now. There is no grade 1 through 4. There's grade 1. That's it.
It sounds like you don't have the same high 3 problem because there's not a city jail that they're going to run to get a higher 3.
No, the folks we're hiring right now are not looking at careers because $12 an hour, you can't make a career.
You're just
on it.
trying to keep them.
I'm just trying to, most of them love their jobs and love what they're doing, but they also have to make a living. I would love to turn it into a place where we have career-oriented people over there. There are about 10 of us there who do that. But the I-3 problem, that's a statewide retirement thing. Most of our folks are not looking at retirement when they come over there.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Anything? No, thank you. Well, I guess everybody else has.
Okay, of course, y'all know I'm coming to you today for my concerns about hiring and retaining employees in my office. Since I became clerk in 2015, 5 years ago, I've had 6 that have left for higher paying jobs. And y'all have to excuse me, I've got allergies and stuff going on. But and then I've also got 1 more leaving at the end of the year. So that's going to be 7 employees in 5 years that I've lost due to higher paying jobs. I gave you all a list of my employees. Out of 18, 9 employees have been here 5 years or less. And out of those 9, 5 of them have been in my office 1 year or less. So this is where the problem is. My top 9 are the ones that, were hired in years ago. They're making the higher salary. They've got the knowledge, the years of learning the jobs. It's these new hires that I'm concerned about as far as retaining them, because if we can't keep the new employees here, I'm very concerned about the office as far as, I was looking today, another clerk sent me the duties of a county clerk, and I stopped counting at 54. And, putting an election together, and granted, we're not hopefully ever going to have another election year like we've had this year, but a normal election requires so much time, so much thought, and I know, the average person's not involved in it, they have no idea what goes into it, but putting an election together, delinquent tax collection, delinquent tax sales, printing the tax bills, the frontline jobs doing vehicle-related transfers, renewals, putting up with the customers, and recording legal documents. There's statutes that we have to go by. We have to know them to know if that document has what it needs to be recorded. And, these are skilled jobs. And I'm just very concerned for the office if we're not able to hire people in at a decent salary, but give them an incentive to stay and be like these that I've got in the top 9, because otherwise, I don't know. It really concerns me as far as the future of the office and running some of those departments that I just stated. I think the main thing that y'all saw that I pointed out, legislation was passed last year for the clerks to, in the each document that's recorded, there is a $10, it's called a storage fee. That was included in legislation strictly for the clerks to use as they see fit. And it's like I've said before, it's comparable to the jail's commissary money or the sheriff's department, the drug money they confiscate. That is the money that I would like to be able to use for these salaries. The plan that I have proposed would fit well within that. Where is that? Yeah, so far this year, or I think this might have even been just through, no, that one was through September, I think. Yeah, January through September 15th. We've already collected $94,850 just in this $10 storage fee. And in recording fees, you know, we got the recording fee increase. We've not had a recording fee increase in 25 years. And that were these two documents here. You're comparing 19 and 20. I added it up this year just through July. We are $257,372 more than what we were at this point last year. That's extra fees, just in recording fees. So
That doesn't count the $10 storage fee
now the $10 storage fee is included in that.
included?
Yes, it is.
So that's 176 plus the 94,000. That's your total there.
No, that includes the 94.
Right.
It'd be the 257,372 minus
I got you.
the 98.
That's the increase.
That
in
other
office.
figure, that 176,
Yes.
the reason that was down a little bit is because auto ad valorem tax was included in that, and we're down a little bit because they gave that extension until October 6th to renew your license. So some of the people in these months haven't paid that normally would have, but that will catch back up after that October 6th deadline expires. But
Could you explain one more time? Does the 176, it does or does not include the storage fee? You added up all those months
Right.
of fees.
yes,
It does include the storage fee.
yeah. Like, it's everything. That's all excess fees. And like I
The
said,
176 does?
Yes.
Okay. Because correct me if I'm wrong, we budgeted $30,000 per month extra for the excess fees.
So we're
For the increase fees.
on track with that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out.
but you see those months, March, April, and May,
They may be more, but
they will, yeah,
they would have been more but for,
COVID,
The COVID.
because they gave the extension through October 6th. So like I said, once that deadline comes around and everybody starts catching back up and paying that, that's going to increase, you know, it's going to increase quite a bit. But that's just what it is now with the circumstances are as they are now. But that does include that.
but there's not a windfall in these numbers, I think is the point.
The windfall's already been accounted for.
Right, the windfall's already,
There is a windfall, but we've already used it.
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a windfall, it was an increase that we put in the budget.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, because we kind of, I think after the first couple of months, we kind of, you know, we could kind of gauge a little bit what it was going to be.
We based it on January.
Oh, was that what it was, January? But I think you noticed July was like a huge increase. Just this last July. Let me get those numbers. Yeah, like mortgage recording fees, July of this year, we took in $30,192. July of last year, it was $9,586. So, and I mean, it was the same increases for deeds and just the general recordings. I mean, it was a significant fee increase.
Probably a lot of that too is refinancing here. There's a lot of.
Right.
A lot of new recordings going on with refinancing right now.
So, back to salaries. You've got a number of $11,340 in your, that's,
Well, what my plan is, and it's kind of like, I think what you were talking about earlier, where we have to start is thinking about the new hires, because that's where the problem is right now. We can't retain them. I mean, they're coming in, we're hiring them in at $25,000, and they're staying a year or two, and they're leaving, they're going to better paying jobs. And so I feel like I've got to start with some kind of an incentive, you know, increase the starting salary a little bit higher, and then give them an incentive after they've come off their 6-month probationary period, another little incentive after a year, and then one yearly until they reach 5 years, and then just the cost of living adjustment then. Okay. But I've called around a couple of the area county clerks. I called Graves County, I called Marshall, I called Livingston. They're all starting their employees anywhere between $13 and $15 an hour. But they also give them raises other than cost of living. Don't know what their, situation is with their insurance and that sort of thing, but that's what they're paying them.
So the $11,000, that's a pure salary number. That's not a benefits number, right?
Right,
Okay.
correct.
All right. Thank you.
And then the starting salary in Pike County, that's one comparable to ours, it was $27,500. Kenton County is $31,000. Franklin County, $31,500. So I think if we can get at least our starting salary and our new hires up to something that's more comparable and get them to where there's an incentive, like, okay, after a year, then, you're going to get $1,000 a year raise. And after 2 years, I just feel like that it will help keep employees. And that's what, like I said, that's what I'm concerned with, because at the end of this term, I wrote it down, I think there's going to be like, I don't know where I wrote it at. Anyway, there's going to be about 5 or 6 of us that are able to retire, that have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of us that will have 27 years or more here.
That is frightening.
It's very frightening. It really is. And I'm not saying, I've got the younger ones down there that are very competent, but it's just learning the jobs and keeping them. And, used to, when somebody hired in back in Martha Nell's days and Randy, they were here. You knew they were here with their 27 years. They knew their job in and out, and it's never been an issue. But, now it just seems like there's not a lot of incentive, and that's why I'm just hoping that if, at least we can kind of get some kind of a pay scale for them that'll give them something to look forward to, some kind of incentive, and then, maybe if there's a little bit more, then maybe a year from now, then, because there's another little group in there that's making a little bit more than them, but not really, as much as some of the others, then. But I think this is the problem right here. And, if I use that part of that money that I was talking about, that's more than enough. It was just a very small amount of what we've already collected.
With the $11,340, would that bring everybody up to $13 an hour? Is that what that does? Or does that meet this 50 cent, 25 cent for those 5 years or less?
It's going to depend on how long they've been here. Like, that 11,000 figure included, say an employee, I had an employee just start in August. So after she's been here 6 months, she would get a 25 cent an hour raise. And then after she's been here a year, she would get another 25 cents. So
that would cover all the employees that have been here 5 years or less to bring them up to this scale.
Yes.
The $11,000 to bring them all up to this scale, 5 years or less.
Yes.
All right, well, we got to get to the harder question. Did you want to ask your question?
What do you think? We've been talking about it being a 4% increase. Myself, I won't speak for anybody else. I believe that we have to create a revenue stream, a recurring revenue, if we're going to create recurring obligations. And so I don't see how we can do it without creating some revenue. But it's not a 4% increase in property tax. It's a 4% of 10%. It's 4% of the county share of income tax. So simply put, it's $4. It would cost somebody who owned $100,000 worth of property, cost them $4 more a year to create, and that would create somewhere in the range of $175,000. That in itself is not going to do a whole lot, but it at least provides a recurring and established fund that would go on to do this. Do you think you and your folks would be in favor of doing that if it appeared that it was necessary to increase their wages.
So I guess I'm speaking on behalf of them.
Well, if you're comfortable, or just you?
On behalf of myself, I think it's necessary. Like I said, and I know people, you know, and I'm not, we have a great sheriff's department, jail, police department, and I know my office, I mean, no, we're not in physical danger. Well, I don't know. Sometimes we do have to call security up there, but it's nothing, I don't mean it's like, what they do is nothing compared to what we do, and I understand that. But it's just so much involved in the jobs that they do. And I know unless you're in the thick of it working, most people don't understand. So I feel like people out in the public, if they still want good services down there, they want their elections to be done correctly. I mean, I don't want McCracken County to get a black eye because we have a botched election, or a tax sale went haywire, or, you know, tax bills didn't get printed, and, you know, and I'm not saying nobody's indispensable, but I've got a great group of people down there, and I want that office to keep continuing to bring up great groups of people. So if that's what it takes to do it, then to keep people there and learn jobs, I'm absolutely for it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Julie.
Anything else from Sheila?
Anything else?
Thank you. Steve, you got some information on from where this money is to come?
Kevin and I will tag team this. This is just kind of some placeholder information to get the conversation started. So, you know, going forward from today, there's the practical reality of the budget, and all of the things that are being talked about in the various departments, we didn't budget for it in the current fiscal year. So how do we do that? So the first method would be you're free to shift around the existing appropriations in the budget. We have a $30 million budget. That was based on $30 million worth of revenue, and we gave every one of those revenue dollars a name, and we put them somewhere. And you're free to shift those around and reallocate them, as long as you don't make the pie bigger. You can make the pie bigger, but that's a different method. And so Pam and I, in reviewing this, where could you do something right now, money you have? The general fund does have a small contingency. We budgeted $500,000 in just sort of stuff happens, and we will need funds that we did not account for. We've allocated some money for that already. We had a $35,000 generator go down at the EOC that you guys approved at your last meeting that we're replacing. We also under budgeted in the sheriff's department in a part-time line item for tax collection. I was just an oversight at budget time. We're going to fix that. I think that's about $8,000. So we still have $450,000 left in there. But traditionally, you do hit your contingencies. You know, there will be other things like generators that will occur down the year. We will wreck some cars in the sheriff's department, and you saw the video, cars get banged up. And we will have run a line item dry, and we'll need to shift money into those things while we're getting insurance proceeds. So it's not exactly free and available money, but we could probably allocate some of that from there.
And that's a one-time pot, though.
That's a one-timer to do you this year. You could also
For the last 2 years, you have reduced the amount of paving you traditionally do. What the fiscal court has traditionally been doing is taking all of the gas tax proceeds that get shared with you from the state, and you throw it into blacktop. Last year we said, to help balance the budget, we're going to reduce that by $500,000, and we did it again this year. There's other qualified expenses like salaries and supplies and equipment and other things we do in the road fund. We could, not saying I'd necessarily recommend this because it creates a long-term problem for us, but you could, you could take some from contingency. You could put less general fund dollars into the road fund and use more of the gas tax proceeds for everyday expenses to create some money. You don't have any.
Which essentially would be using the gas tax to pay salaries, is what you do.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. We don't have any excess dollars in the sheriff's fund, and we don't have any excess dollars in the jail fund. There's no dollars hiding out in those two funds. Or flipping the page, you could amend the budget. Say I want to change the budget, but because and remember the state approves your budget, and appropriations have to equal revenues. And we can do that one of two ways. You can tell GLG you've created a new source and here's how much it is, and amend the budget up. That would be I'm going to take $175,000 worth of property tax in November, December, and I'm going to add it to the budget and then spend it out after January 1st. Or as in particular my discussions with Commissioner Bartleman, some of these revenues that we've projected in the current budget might be low, but I don't think DLG will let us arbitrarily change those right now. We have to prove up that those are low, and we have to start recording some of those revenues. And we haven't recorded all of them yet. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. Well, how about right now? If you flip the page, the chart shows, let's see, five years of collections in the broad category we call occupational taxes. If you go to the column on the right, marked total, you can see going back to 2016, what that has produced. And it's split between payroll taxes and net profits. And you can see something interesting going on in the chart. Payroll's going up, net profits are going down. Not exactly sure why that is. And not exactly sure, particularly in some of these strong economy years, why it was flat. You would expect some increase. Likewise, by this time we would have expected some decrease because of COVID, but we haven't seen that show up in our budget just yet. So traditionally, I think we were budgeting. I think in 2019 you budgeted, I'm going to say 6.2 million is what we budgeted for the year. We ended up with a little bit more. But in May, when we were making these decisions and we were in the middle of lockdown, we took a pretty serious look downward on occupational taxes. And that was for two reasons, just because it seemed like businesses were closing and we expected there would be eventually a constriction of payroll tax and a continuing trend of smaller net profits tax. It's just got to happen at some point. But because so much, particularly of the net profits, happens in the rear, so in this last April, we were supposed to collect for the prior year. There was nothing that happened from a tax standpoint bad about 2019. There was no COVID, generally a strong economy. we should have collected everything in April, but we didn't. When the federal government decided we're going to kick the collection of income taxes out, well, that affected state and it affected local collection. So some of those dollars got kicked into the current year. Just like what we're going to see in April of next year, or April of 21 will really be for the current calendar year that we're in right now, barring any sliding or pushing out. We just don't know. But what has happened with COVID and the messing with the schedules is sort of a little unprecedented. So are we low? Possibly. When will we know? April is when we'll get really the first indication of how low or how bad it is. But interestingly, and Pam, refute me or back me up, we're not seeing it yet in payroll, which is a good thing. But at some point, I got to believe we got to see some impact. Insurance premium tax. We haven't seen.
Let me ask you this, Steve, on that 6.4. So what you're saying in the 2020, the 6.4 total there, an unknown amount of that is from last year, from people not paying, by the federal government allowing people to pay instead of April. Have we had the deadline yet?
Yeah, it was July.
In July, okay. But we don't know how much inflated that 6.4 is due to people paying late or not regular time.
I mean, we do receive the individual records. We don't, but we sort of amalgamate them and just report it on a monthly basis. So there's really two things in the delay going on. One, the deadline moved from April 15th to July 15th. And then there's also the taxpayers that file for extensions. And so if you file for an extension, ours extends along with it. So it, it's October then before we see those. But the dollars that came into FY21 in July, some of that, yes, absolutely went back to calendar year 2019. It happens that far in the rearview mirror.
Do you not think the payroll end up is going to stay pretty strong because, if nothing else, because of PPP?
I think it has so far.
Probably through the end of this year, and then maybe first quarter next year, you're going to see it.
That's
it's going to start drying up.
Up to Congress.
Yeah. But if they don't do anything else right now, I mean, it'll dry up after the first of the year.
And when we were making our decisions at budget time, it just looked like it was going to be a downturn, an economic downturn, and we did not know at that time or understand the impacts of PPP, how much of it would be approved, how much of it would be out there, or even really how many businesses in McCracken County would slow down or close their doors. We know some did, and we know some got PPE, and they continued to pay their taxes into the county.
Just to clarify, that 6.4 million would have been higher without the extension, right?
Yes, because we saw an abnormally high July.
So that's an actual dollar number of what came in. I mean, our net profits was down 200,000 from the previous year. Our payroll was up 300,000. So conceivably, if it all had been paid on time, that could have been up another $200,000 to $300,000.
Could have had a great year. Yep.
Very easily,
Yep.
at least.
Yep.
Based on the income increase in the payroll tax. So.
But remember,
But that money will come in then this fiscal year.
What we recorded in that by June 30th was the net profits from the previous year and the accumulation of payroll taxes, which we collect every quarter.
Did you have any idea how much payroll? Net profits was down 200,000 because people deferred. You know what percentage of people deferred payment? Could you tell from what came in? Couldn't tell. Okay.
But the net, I would anticipate that the net profits is where we're going to take the hit.
you got to believe it at some point, right? At some point, it's got to catch us.
And the
PPE,
PPE,
payroll protection plan.
it's tax-free. I'm just kind of thinking as a business owner, if I substitute that for earnings and it's tax-free, then I'm not going to pay you tax on it either.
Correct.
So I'm getting this tax-free money from, not me, but businesses are getting tax-free money that they're not going to have to pay tax on. So that's going to compound
Our problem.
eventually on net profits.
Was that tax-free money, or was that money they just didn't have to pay back?
I don't think they've decided yet. I don't think it's totally tax-free.
It's not tax-free money.
Well, certainly the part that they paid employees, that wasn't tax-free to us. They still had to pay their payroll tax on that.
Right. But on the net profit
it wasn't,
part.
to the owner, it wasn't earnings, or seems to me.
I thought that will go in their earnings, but they don't have to pay it back.
They don't have to pay the loan or the grant back.
But it is taxed. Do you know that for a fact, or are you speculating? I think it's taxed.
I'm not sure.
I'm telling you, I've gotten some email traffic saying that's going to be tax-free money, but
It's not taxed.
it is not taxed.
It's not taxed as profit, but it's payroll tax.
But at the
You
same
pay
point,
payroll tax.
that was followed with question marks. If it is tax-free, that's going to affect our net profits.
On that side of the column, yes.
But
If that part is,
75%
but
of it
but what they paid out in
is
payroll
taxed.
was not
But
tax-free.
the 75% that was used for payroll, we'll collect on the payroll
Correct.
tax.
That's right.
But that net profits
That's
number,
25%, you don't have to pay it on that, it won't be net profit on the bottom line if you're a small business.
yeah, if you're a small business, instead of getting $200,000 of income, you got $200,000 from the government, and that ends up being tax-free, then you're not going to pay any tax.
On 50,000 of it.
Possibly on the net
25%.
profits, but not on the payroll side.
But they still might have the income. Because I don't think we had a whole lot of businesses shut down in our area where they didn't produce revenue. If we were in the city, they lost a lot of revenue because restaurants were shut down and retail stores were shut down. But thanks to the city's annexation, we don't have much restaurants or commercial operations, and I don't think we're going to lose a whole lot from that.
So the bottom line, what really matters, and it's all very riveting, whether all this, but the bottom line is, can we estimate that we budgeted less than what we're gonna see in that category? Are we gonna have some money there to pay toward wages?
Possibly, but we won't know until April.
Right. And we don't have a feel for how much, even a ballpark amount of what that might be. Budgeted 4.65, whether it be potentially 10% more or 30, or we just don't know.
Don't know.
So that's a potential source for pot two.
That's a potential source for pot two.
And that's a one-time. That's not a recurring.
That's a good point. Well,
No. That, it is one time, but it should be, it should be, continue to grow, really. In a good scenario. Now, if COVID tanks the whole economy, you're right, it's a one time that's gonna shrink.
well, but
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's the question really is, and we don't know the answer, and I don't know if anybody does, is how much permanent damage is COVID doing
That's right.
to the business community? We know it's not helping, right? So I think it's how bad is it hurting?
But essentially, we balanced our budget anticipating a $1.6 million deficit in that tax.
Yes.
All right, so if it doesn't occur, then it would be potentially reoccurring. We just won't know until April, and then the April after that.
And so, right, so we get this sort of one look at the net profits every year, and we get quarterly look at payroll. And if you can tell me what the relationship to payroll or net profits, there should be one, but you can't really prove it from our records.
I think the PPP probably skews that number right now.
So anyway, that's a possible recurring source to put toward wages, but we won't know at what level that is until April and get a better knowledge even as we go forward.
Correct.
So that's a guess.
That's a guess. And the other one that we keep looking at, because it occurs quarterly, is payroll. And we have not seen the precipitous drop. Not entirely sure why, but we have not seen it yet.
Well, I think Bill may be right about that.
We may not be as effective.
We've got the school system and DOE, which is not
And hospital.
in house. Well, they're in the city.
They're in the city.
Yeah.
Skip number 2 for a second, because I kind of address it on the next page. So if you go to page 5, where it says revenue continued, you've done some things in your budget, namely in 2019, with real estate tax, to the $4.2 million we collect, you added $165,000, and you added $335,000 from inventory tax, and I'm rounding those off. They vary a little bit, but they're not far off from that number. And we budgeted them. They are in this current year budget. Insurance premium tax, we don't exactly know. My feeling is it's around $2 million. It's going to be around $2 million. We budgeted $1.3 million this year because of the collection cycle. So the first year you only collect 3 quarters because the tax went into effect in July, and so there will be only 3 collection quarters in this fiscal year, and then starting next July we'll get 4 quarters every year. So the first quarter, this will be coming in. I talked to John Perkins about this because the city collects this, and he said, yes, after the first quarter, you'll get money. Don't look. He saw me say something on the media, we'll know in October. He said, you won't know in October. You'll know in November, because wait till the very last minute, and it shows up on your books in November. So in the October-November cycle, if we don't get 450,000, that's kind of the number to look at. If it's greater than 450, great. That'll be a good sign for us. If it's not 450,000, it'll be a head scratcher. But we did budget for these 3 quarters that we'll receive this year, $1.3 million. That's already in the budget. I concede that may prove low. I guess we will know when we know on that one as well. But we haven't collected anything yet. Also, a lesson from John is there's annual volatility in the collection, and you don't know why. So while the good thing about this tax is it hums along with inflation. So as the value of cars and homes and things go up, our collection should go up. But it doesn't go up in a straight line. We'll see it'll go up in a jagged up and down line from year to year. And you'll wonder. So the city sees that volatility. It'll go down $500,000 the next year for some unexplained reason, and then come back and then some the next year. So it's, I think, going to take us a couple years to get a good feel of what is the budget number. We might end up budgeting 80% of what we collected just to account for that fluctuation that will come in that cycle that we likely will never understand why that is. So I think really it will be more like, again, in that March, April timeframe, we'll have, a couple quarters under our belt. We're going to start to get a better feel at that time as to whether or not our estimate is high or low. And then we already discussed this. I wrote 330. I think we actually did 360 in the budget for the increased fees. We kind of based that on January. I don't know if that was the smartest thing to do. And as Julie said, we've booked 176,000 through July. So crazy COVID year. Some of her months have been terrific. Some of her months, she's actually been less than 2019. So if you kind of throw the whole thing out, we're up. Will we hit 330? I think so. Based on what Julie is seeing, but that was already baked into the budget and spent.
So we budgeted 30 and we're getting 25. We've gotten 25,000.
Right.
176 divided by 7. So we're
right.
It's not a windfall.
It's not because we considered it in July and figured it would happen. If you flip the page. CARES Act, the state allocated $2.2 million of its $4 billion got in CARES Act money to McCracken County. We learned earlier this week we've been approved for our first $940,000. We're getting an MOU on that, and we will be getting that. We feel like that process has gone pretty well. We'll have one more application to go for and get the rest of it. So one-time money, but a real nice thing to help with our liquidity. So we did not know this was going to happen. Nobody did. So we did not include it in our budget in July. We had the sale of the Genova asset. Our share of that was $1.8 million. Then we paid off the note on that. It was around $650,000. We got about $1.1 million left. That is, those dollars are sitting in the ED fund right now. We have as healthy of an ED fund as we probably have ever had at this point. We have roughly $2 million in the ED fund. Right now. I did want to point you back to what Moody's said about us last December. I mean, this is not an ancient history thing. This happened less than a year ago. We got re-rated, and our credit got downgraded, and it was primarily for shrinking fund balance, lack of liquidity, and unsustainable pension burden. Those were kind of the three things they kept going back to. And while is that rating all that important to our daily operation? No, but it is an independent view of where you're sitting and people that are going to loan you money and how much that cost of money will be. And I thought there were things that were instructive in the report that said, here are the things that can lead to a credit increase, and here's the things that could lead to a credit decline. And we're doing the right things at this point, I think, in terms of budget management and increasing revenues. No question about that. But there are also things that are hard for us to manage and continue to be a challenge, and that will be pension. What we talked about and led you to the decisions you made with the insurance premium tax this past spring are still largely true. In terms of deficit spending, we continue to do that. We planned for a deficit again this year. We planned for a deficit last year, and we planned for a deficit again this year, even though we're improving, and I think those are getting worse. And when the audit comes in, we may even find out, well, I think with the CARES Act money is going to get pointed to the previous fiscal year. I think that's the way that's going to happen, because that's when the the federal period for when that money was allocated occurred. So for that reason alone, you will not have deficit spent last year. I think that will prove up. This year, though, when we came into July, I thought for sure we would not plan for a deficit, but we did because we took a dim view on occupational taxes, did not know of any COVID assistance. It didn't exist at that time, and we really didn't know what the insurance premium tax was going to be. Maybe, on an annual basis it will end up being greater than $2 million, but we just didn't know that yet. So in order to balance the budget, when we took all the revenues and even adding the new ones of the clerk's fee and the ones you had created in 2019 and the insurance premium tax, we still had to put some of our fund balance into it to balance the budget with the spending that was planned. Outlook. So positive things have happened in your budget. There's no doubt about that. The decisions you made with 2019 prop and inventory tax, what the legislature did with clerk fees, the insurance premium tax, and FY20 ended pretty well for us. The general fund on the appropriation side performed really well. We underspent that budget by $754,000. Randy Williams and the road department did a terrific job. They were almost $400,000 under budget. The jail was $604,000 under its appropriation budget. That was, I think, a COVID dividend, likely. The jail emptied out in the last quarter of the year, and they had less consumables, less food, less utilities, less spending generally. And the sheriff ended up being about $21,000 under budget. And coming for this year, what happened with the sale of the Genova asset, we have that debt off of our books. While we have that debt off of our books, we also lost income. We had that liability, we paid that annually, but we were getting rent income on that building too. And when we sold it, we lost the rent as well. I'm glad to have it off our books, but that debt was primarily being paid for through rentals.
So the difference there is it's about $50,000.
$50,000, yeah.
We're spending less because we don't own that.
Because of that, yes. And then we have a couple other debts coming off, but that's already baked into the budget. Yep. And part of what I do is worry about the future, and if you want to, in addition to taking care of the employees, there's some things that are not optional that are in the pipeline, like the radio system. When you sat through the presentations at this time happened last fall, everything we have is functionally obsolete and needs to be replaced in the next year or two. We got to get serious about that project, and that's, if we split that with the city of Paducah, we could be in the $6 to $8 million range for our share. Soccer and ball fields, I do not believe that the transient room tax will be enough to cover that project from both a maintenance standpoint and the capital take to build that facility. I think that's a reality. I think the airport will be approaching you soon about the local share of that project, and there's going to be some economic development project. There always is, and it will take dollars for that as well. Those are all sort of unknowns at this point, but I don't think the dollar figures associated with any of those are insubstantial. Fortunately, we do have some of the, we have pretty good war chest building up in the Economic Development Fund to blunt, at least one of these off the list. And the last thing that there's only one thing that keeps me up here at night, and that's what has already occurred with pensions and how tough a situation that is. And as I told you in my memo, I don't call it a crisis anymore. It's a permanent condition that we have gotten used to, and it will continue to just gobble up more and more of our resources. We're looking at $3 million new dollars by 2025 that we don't have. So while I personally agree with everything the clerk and the jailer and the sheriff said, everything they articulated to you was not an exaggeration by any stretch, and those are real problems. The cost of the benefits associated with those employees, particularly the hazardous duty ones, is just really expensive. So when you hear, $1 of salary, you have to be thinking, no, it's really $1.50 today. And by 2027, when you think of $1 for salary, add $1 for pension costs.
Are there any other bonds that'll be paid off in the next 6 months? I know the two that you've already baked in.
Well, there were I think.
Is there anything that comes a year later that's not baked in, or?
No, and then some of the things that are sort of in the near horizon, that could I pick them off? Not really, and they have call dates that are pushed out. You couldn't even pay them off early if you wanted to. I think the next one after the ones that go out in 2021 are 2024. Something in 2024 goes out, and then we drop a real big one in 2025 at a convention center one, but that one is paid for by transient room tax.
What about the on the CARES Act money? We got 900 something thousand. We're approved for 2.2. I noticed when I was reading from the governor's office that it talked about a lot. Are we getting money back for police and jail? A lot of the communities did. I mean, is that an option to?
That's how we applied.
Okay, so that's on that basis also.
Yep.
So you're pretty confident that we'll get that plus we'll get the whole 2.2.
We got our letter of approval for the 940,000.
And we should get the rest of the 2.2 on the next.
Have you seen the MOA yet? Have you signed that? So, we're expecting any day the MOA, and as soon as we get the MOA, we'll get the funding, and then we'll apply for the rest of the 2.2 by November 1st.
Okay.
So the reserve fund,
The reserve,
remind me where we were June 30th.
about 2.3 million.
And that needs,
That's unaudited.
Okay.
We're auditing right now.
in your opinion, the reserve fund should be what?
In my opinion, it should be a third of the general fund. General fund's about 17 million, 18 million.
So,
And a minimum of
5.5
million, a minimum of 4 million, never get below that. And what would give you excellent credit rating, cash flow, rainy day fund, and the ability not to borrow money for small projects would be to have a third of the general fund always in reserve.
so if we don't blow it, we're on a path to get there by the end of, in 2 more years, right?
We're making strides toward that. So I thought, that this was going to be our recovery year, and then COVID happened. But then 2 unexpected things happened with Genova and the CARES assistance. I've never seen that in 30 years, that much money come from or that much money just boom show up in your budget due to unexpected things. Usually the unexpected things go the other way. They're costing you heavily for something that has happened. But so that really helps with your liquidity, and the CARES money. So do you spend those dollars? I think you'd be really strategic with those dollars, because they're one-time infusions into your budget, and I would not assign a reoccurring cost to that money, because you will run out of that money and you'll find yourself in a dilemma in a few years.
I guess that's what I was saying. If we don't treat the CARES Act money like it's reoccurring money and let it apply to our reserve, we potentially could have our reserve depending upon what pensions does to us.
Yes. I'm not saying you need to guard all of it. It might be nice for some short-term stuff. It doesn't alleviate your I think your how to do this is build in what is permanent and reoccurring, and also the COVID money for will that. We took almost $2 million out of the occupational tax projection, and COVID fits back on top of that to get you back to 6.2 million. Will COVID have a long-term damaging effect on our tax collections? We just don't know the answer to that yet.
One thing we didn't talk about is on the occupational tax. That wage number, we do know, will start going down because of the revenue sharing agreements that expire.
Did not mention that. We get about between $350,000 and $400,000 a year. That was in my memo, but not in this presentation, currently from the city and revenue sharing. Those 25-year programs are wrapping up.
I want to get pensions. When you say an extra $3 million, but in 4 years, for 5 years.
So,
are you saying $3 million per year?
Yes, more than you're spending now.
So instead of a $30 million budget, we got to plan for a $33 million budget by 2025 in order to keep doing what we're doing now.
So next fiscal, if you didn't make any changes in the jail and the sheriff, and each of those departments next year will hit $1 million in pension costs for the first time. So I guess it's been 2 or 3 years ago, the state released here's our through 2027, and the rates go up 12% a year. So this year on hazardous duty, we were to go to 44% because of COVID. They froze the hazard.
From where?
From 39%.
From 39 to 44, okay.
Yeah, right. So and it's like 39.65. So they froze it at that level, but next year is scheduled to go to 49.5%. That's why I say, in today's dollars, when you talk about adding $1, you're really adding a $1.50, and in 6 more fiscal years, you'll be adding $2. A dollar of pay will equal $1 of pension costs.
So
short of there being some solution that we've been waiting for the legislature to do for 20 years.
We're down to, we got about 25 minutes to try to finish out. I've got to be out, ironically, maybe, at the airport where they're going to ask us for $3 to $3.5 million of our share for a local match for the airport terminal. So I'm headed out to that at 11:30. But to me, it's all educated guesswork, I guess. But to me, there's 2 strong principles that we cannot violate. And that is, maybe the main one is that a recurring obligation, like a wage, has to be funded by a recurring revenue. We can't take CARES money or take a sale of a property or whatever, a lump of money here that we got at one time and say, okay, we're going to pay a salary increase to anybody based on that, because once that money's spent, then those people would like to be paid continually. And it's just a principle that I think we cannot violate. We have to find a recurring salary revenue, and generally that's through a tax or payroll income or that sort of thing. The other thing I think that's really we have to abide by, and we have no choice on this, is that DLG, Department of Local Government, must approve any additional spending in our budget. And it's not a matter of us being able to say, well, we think we're going to have more revenue, and so we're going to increase wages in these departments. We've got to be able to say, here's the revenue that we're going to have that we missed, that we didn't budget for, because we're only still in the first quarter of our budget, and so where did we miss something, where did we miss something, or what's a recurring revenue that's coming that is new? In my mind, those are the two principles that we just can't do. People, when you give them a wage increase, they base their life upon that. They might buy a new car, buy a bigger house, do whatever. The idea that I heard that, well, if we gave too much raise, we'd take it back, that can't be done. We give the wage based on what we have some good faith, reasonable basis that we can afford, and that revenue will continue to provide our ability to do that. So I don't know. We don't have, there's some magic number when you throw all this in the pot and you spin it around, does outspit some number that we think we can, with some reliance, have that will continue on, either through the same source or something else. In other words, simply put, how much money can we reasonably say we have to put toward wage increases? Is there any kind of a crystal ball, any kind of or in hard facts, is there some number we can come up with?
Without changing the budget or increasing the revenue?
Yeah, right now, as we sit, without making any changes.
I'm afraid it wouldn't be substantial. It wouldn't be, transformative like these departments need.
Right.
Do you have a number? Or?
Well, my recommendation hasn't changed from my memo. Is I would allocate $375,000 this year for increases. If you elected to take an additional $175,000 on property tax, and then implement it July 1, so that would get us through the fiscal year. It would get us past some of these unknowns, and then that you don't have to. That goes into your tax base after that and becomes effectively permanent. So that's what I recommend.
I wasn't too far off.
Can I comment?
Yeah, what I wanted to do is you had represented that you found ways that you think were good. So I think a smart way to go about it is take what you found, and hopefully, I hope you're right. I hope we're just walking right through tall clover and all this is hocus pocus, but I don't see it. If you've got the numbers you found, let's go through each of those things.
I wasn't done.
Well, by God, go ahead then. I'm sorry.
I just want to finish what I was saying. I mean,
I thought you were done.
No,
Well, go ahead.
okay. I said I wasn't far off. I like that type of figure. The sheriff's department, the jail, and the clerk, I'd figure at 320,000. And I'd like to see the sheriff's department get 175 of that, and the jail 125, and the clerks, I think you're a little bit low because you didn't have your insurance and your retirement figured in, probably 20,000. And that would be on a 4-year plan to get them up. But we would have to do it a year at a time because we don't know what, like you keep saying, you don't know what the future's gonna hold.
But I think you're right. We've got to figure out where we're going to pay for it from.
Yeah.
That's where
Now, I'm done.
Okay. You ready?
I spent a lot of time going through the budget and over the past few years and the revenue balances. And let me tell you what I found. I think we've increased our position significantly. It's much better today than what it was a year ago. And here's why. Last year we increased the real estate tax by 4%. That brought out about $200,000 additionally. The inventory tax brought in $335,000. Higher clerk fees will bring in at least $350,000, probably as much as $450,000 based on the averages of what we've seen already. The insurance tax, once that's fully implemented, will be $2 to $3 million. I think it might be $2 million this year and $3 million once fully implemented. Also, based on the new real estate, our real estate income will increase by $200,000 this year without a 4% increase, because the has $200 million in new property, and that will bring in another $200,000. And that's what the figures show from the reports we have. That will bring in, that's at least, that's $3.5 to $4 million of recurring revenue that's new to our budget. The Genova bond was paid off. That saves us $120,000. We're getting $100,000 a month, a year rent from Teletech. The sheriff annex will be paid off in January, and that saves us from our previous budget $300,000 a year. So that's $520,000 in savings. That's total revenue of recurring revenue we have, or savings of at least $3.5 million and probably $4.5 million. We've reduced the deficit in the jail funding. In 2019-20, we budgeted $7.2 million for the jail. The actual spending was $6.6 million, and that's even though we had a $220,000 decrease in jail revenue from state. So we had a net savings in the jail, not savings, but it cost us $400,000 less to fund the jail than what we had budgeted.
Let me ask you this. Here's my frustration with this list, is if anybody disagrees with an item, we've got to remember to go back through this litany. Can we take these one at a time? And
Yeah,
let
that's
everyone...
fine if we have time.
I mean, for example, you just mentioned the jail deficit. It went down, but I mean, that's probably a one-time thing because we kicked everyone out of jail, and it presumes that district judges aren't going to go back to put the people in jail.
Well, a lot of that was because of changes made in the jail too. So
No.
I think some things he did to reduce cost, and
I mean,
I
he's
here
here.
to explain exactly why, but he did things to reduce that.
Well, the reductions that he planned, particularly in medical, well, we budgeted that number.
Right.
And that's what, I guess, Bill, and I'm not trying to be rude, but some of this is already in the budget.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking for new money.
Well, let me finish going through it all and show the entire picture. Again, the jailers committed to put $100,000 in to help pay medical expenses. That will help. The Economic Development Fund, we're worried about that. We got $2 million in that. That'll go a long way to help in some incentives to have $2 million in there. Plus we have other sources with PACRO and other places. We're going to get $2 million from the CARE funds.
So we've got $2 million in economic development. Are you suggesting we use that for salaries?
No, but that will not cost us later on to do bonding. we won't have to come up with cash money later on to help fund triple rail or something else. It reduces the amount we're probably going to have to.
It reduces some of our future work.
Right.
I got you. I agree with that.
So, and that's kind of in the outlook he had. I think the real picture can be seen in the excess fund balances we have. Since October 2018, when you compare fund balances from year to year, month to month, it has increased every month. It's increased since October 2018 when we had a low of $767,000. Our fund balance, when compared month to month or year to year per month, has increased every single month since that time. So I don't understand how we say. Go ahead.
So you're using my data against me. The increases we're seeing, yes, they're there and they're real, are, you know, $1 million of that, or $1 million of that you can just trace to two things: reduced paving and the unexpected savings we got in the jail that was really related to
well, that's good then. Then we were fiscally responsible and we cut some spending to make that happen.
We were, but I don't think that I don't think we're spinning off, and those aren't monthly excess numbers. So when I send you my monthly report and say here are the balances in these funds, that's not free and available cash. Those dollars all have a name on them for a future expense that's already in the budget. The key month to look at is June, because we no longer name those dollars, and that's what's left and what's available. But then we even take those dollars and say I need it to balance the next fiscal year.
In June of 2020, we had $3.8 million balance, which was a $1.3 million balance from the previous year.
What was it again? June?
June of 2020 was $3.8 million. And in June of 2019, it was $2.6 million.
And I can point to two things that account for $1 million of that. Was we did $500,000 less in paving, which I don't think you ought to make that permanent. And we had a pretty good year in the jail because of COVID. They were $604,000 under budget. I mean,
and then our balance at the end of August was $4.4 million. And traditionally, looking back at the history of
that also includes $1.8 million that went into the sale of the Genova asset.
That doesn't include the $4.4 million.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. The $4.4 million is the amount that we have, less the Economic Development Fund, less the we had $7-point-some million in there when you take the Economic Development Fund out, the transient room tax money out. It's $4.4 million.
You're correct.
Are we looking at cash balance?
Yes.
But it does include the big month of the deferred.
Yes. So in July, which was very abnormal, we had $1 million in occupational taxes. We would not expect to ordinarily see that. That I think is a one-time condition.
Well, it was a makeup, wasn't it, for other? But anyway, we had $4.4 million. Traditionally, from August to October, which are September, October, are our low months, we reduced it by about $1 million. So that would be about a $3.4 million balance, maybe at the end of October.
How much do you think is going to be in October?
About $3.4 million. That's a rough estimate. Based on previous years, it cost about.
I think
it's reduced by about $1 million from September to October because they're the lean.
I agree with you that I think our October is going to be less scary. That's what that cash balance really tells us. It's not that we haven't already spent that money. It's just that, in October 2018, we'd already spent that money but didn't have it. We at least have. We're not going to run out.
And then when we get the COVID money, that will increase our cash balance. I agree that we should
it will.
use the COVID money for, well, some of it is to cover our losses by recurring expenses, but even without that increases our cash balance significantly. And I don't understand, I've never understood why a government agency has to have a 30% cushion. If I operate a private business and I make widgets and I have to shut down and I can't sell my widgets, I've got to have a cushion to cover those expenses that go along, even though I'm not producing widgets. But in county government, we're never going to lose, it's never going to come a period of time when we have no revenue coming in, because people are always going to owe taxes. So I agree we need to have enough money to cover our cash flow, but I'm not sure we need to have that big, high $6 or $7 million, which we had previously. And in some ways, I don't worry about the Moody rating for the county, because if we want to borrow some money, we can go through the CAECO Lending Trust. And when we do that, we use their bond rating and not our bond rating. So I think we need to have I hate to have $5 or $6 million in the bank and not properly pay our employees. I'd rather have $4 million in the bank and pay our deputies what they need to be paid our jail employees what they need to be paid, and pay our clerk employees what they need to be paid. Again, we need to have a cushion for a
It's a good thing we had that cushion that got up to, I think, $12 million, because we spent every bit of it over a period of 10 years.
Well, that was done to pay off bonds that previous fiscal courts didn't generate revenue to pay.
Right.
If you go back and there were some bad deals made. Again, the Murray State project was, not that that was a bad project, but the deal that was made where we pay $350,000 a year and the city pays $150,000 a year, you know, that's something we probably need to sit down and
the widget factory can close.
and discuss some more.
The county can't close.
You know, I think you make a good point that we shouldn't incur debt bond without recurring income, and I think wages is exactly that. I mean, it's even more.
I think this year we
bonds.
can cover the wage increases without increasing taxes. Because of the high amount of new property that we have this year, I think next year when we get our tax rate, I think the compensating rate, I mean, we obviously don't know what's going to happen, but because of the high amount of new property, I think the compensating rate next year will be less than the 10.1 it is this year. And then next year, we can keep the tax rate the same without increasing people's taxes. This is a 4% increase on local taxes. If somebody has $100,000 tax and paid $100,000 last year,
it is not
we
that.
increase the 4%.
And we can't put that out that it's a 4% increase on property tax,
Well, it is.
because it is not.
It is. If you paid
It is not.
if you have a $100,000 house, you paid $100 last year. If we increase it 4%, you're going to pay $104 this year. That's a 4% increase.
It's a 4% increase to 10% of their property tax, and I think that's the point you're
Well,
trying
I'm
to
talking about your
make.
tax bill. I agree with that. I mean,
Well, but
on your
I
tax
just think
bill, it's a 4% increase.
It's a 4% to the county's share of.
That's right.
Because your tax bill on a $100,000 house is $1,000. We're talking about, it would go up from $1,000 to $1,004. Well, that's not 4%. It's that's much less.
I mean, it depends on what, but your county, your tax you pay to the county goes up 4%. It's not
Yes,
a
I agree.
4% increase. in your
10% of your bill would go up 4%.
I'll agree with that. But again, it's a 4% increase in what you pay in your county taxes.
Well, county taxes
The county
generally
share,
includes the county share of the county taxes.
It's 4% and 10%, basically.
And that's not much money, I agree with that.
It's $4 on $100,000 worth of property.
Did you have do you have concerns about pensions and the increase?
I think we've hit our taxpayers pretty hard this year, and even though it's a small break, I think we just need to, and I think we can do that. We can do the pay increases in increments. We can do, I think what you propose, I think we can easily do the $350 immediately to increase the lower paid employees and then come out with a stronger plan next year.
Well, and the thing I think that stands out, Commissioner, I know you believe these things and you think these things, and you said a couple of times, but we really don't know, but we think. And I want to give everybody that we can a raise at whatever level, but it's a one-way road. If we give it, then we've got to. There is just, I can't waver from the idea that if we have a recurring obligation, a debt, which is a wage increase to employees, that we have to have a known, not a think, but a known recurring revenue to fund that. And we just don't. We can talk about comparing months and back and forth and all of that. I just believe that this community, if faced with the idea, we cannot, the reason I oppose putting this as a 4% tax increase, that's what people see. And it is not that. It is $4 per 100,000 increase. So person owns $100,000 of property, he's going to pay $4 more, whatever that is a day or a month or whatever. 200,000 going to pay $8 or more in order to give our sheriff's deputies, our jail, and spread on to the clerk at whatever levels a raise. But the public sentiment, I think, is certainly behind the sheriff's department. The jail, frankly, they've got the challenge that I don't think anybody gives a big hoot out in the public about what our jailers make, because they don't see a definite, a tangible benefit by criminals being locked up. But they do when they need public service and emergency help from the sheriff's department. And so that's where you got sort of the sentiment. And I think the clerk maybe is probably better off because people don't interact, well, few do, with the jail, but they do interact with the clerk's office, and they do interact with the sheriff's department, and they see the importance of that. So the jail needs to be certainly incentivized as well. But in this thing of, most of the money we're talking about, I guess not all of it, not the COVID, I guess, but most every fund that we're talking about here has already been budgeted. We've already spent that. We've already estimated that we're going to have this hit, or we're going to have this increased revenue. And so it's in the budget. And so we can't say, okay, we're going to spend it twice. That's just my position. And I think that people, that's why when they had advertised, started the process in case we should be convinced after this talk or next or whatever, that we do need to generate some more money. And of course, we've hit, we've raised revenue several times already, but we had about 3 decades of no tax increase of any substance. And so that fell upon us, and I'm proud that we were able to recognize that and take that step. Personally, I think it should have been at a higher rate, even on the ones we did. If it had been, we wouldn't maybe be struggling so much with this, but we are where we are. So we got just a couple of minutes.
I also think our payroll tax revenue is much under budgeted. We've got 4 point in there, and it was
4.65.
Even if it's down $1 million, it's still another $1 million. Well, we'll have the revenue. We have the money now that we can do what Mr. Doolittle proposes, and then by next March or April, we'll be able to put together a plan to do a second phase of increases to meet the goals. I just think we have the money now. The $170,000 that would come in from increasing it, taking the 4% rate, will not make or break any plan we have to fund it. We have that money now.
How much do we have now? How much do we have?
Well, I just went through numbers of how much we increased.
We got over
$4 million in our cash balance. We funded $150,000 of payroll increases in administrative offices.
Do you feel like we did not account for that when we did our budget? I mean, we gnashed and gnarled and pulled hair on our budget.
I think a lot of the numbers are, a lot of the numbers do not reflect potential savings in the jail that I think we'll have, but we don't know that. I agree with that. But can do $375,000 with the revenue we have now and our income we have now. We can do that.
Well, I just want to, I agree with you on a couple of points.
Well, that's good.
But for example, you mentioned Teletech. I mean, you know, they're as likely to not be here as be here. We can't say to deputies, we commit to pay you more money because we think Teletech might pay rent, because the likelihood they'll be here paying rent 5 years, 10 years from now is, you know, well, yeah, you just can't count on that kind of income for recurring government spending. And I feel like I think you hit upon this is exactly why we got into trouble, is because there was this bond that was taken and nobody said we need to make sure we have recurring money to do that. And I believe if we take a bond, what we all feel needs to happen, which is an increase in the deputy jailers and the deputy sheriffs and to the clerk's office, we are taking on the equivalent of a permanent bond, one that we can't take away. I think you're exactly right. We can't give these raises and then say later, well, we didn't plan for them and it didn't work out right, and we didn't do the math right on the increased pension costs, so we're going to have to lower your salary. Sorry you had a couple kids. You know, the other tax, like you mentioned the inventory tax. Yes, we raised the inventory tax, but that's already in the budget. And as you pointed out, and I think you discovered, that's income that would have gone to the state, but for our action. I mean, the local resident or person who was going to pay that inventory tax, they were going to pay it to somebody. We just found a way to capture it locally, and I think you were part of the reason we did that and figured that out. Clerk's fees, it's already in the budget. But I agree with you that we may be low on the occupational tax, but we won't know that for certain until April. And we may not even know that for certain until April of 2021. It depends on when the effects of this virus leave our economy.
Let me ask on that point right there, and Steve and Pam, you know this better than I do. So and what I understand you're saying, Mr. Barman, is you believe that we have 375 in the budget that we didn't recognize when we budgeted. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, I think based on our cash balance at the end of every month, it keeps going up. We're not deficit spending if our balance is going up every month.
Well, what I want to get to, if that's the case, we believe that we miscalculated. We have 375 or some ballpark figure like that in our budget that we didn't see. Isn't it correct, Steve, that we have to, if we want to amend our budget by increasing the wages, we have to be able to show Department of Local Government that we did miscalculate that and give them some evidence, some proof, not just say, well, we think we miscalculated. Are we able to just, without DLG approval, amend our budget by paying more wages based on the idea that we're off on our figure?
When we amend our budget, they ask us to submit supporting documents for which they must agree. So the obvious way to do that is, or the regular way we do that, and we usually do it towards the end of the year, is we say, Pam submits a report that says, I want to increase this revenue this much because I've already collected it. Last March, we wanted to, when we were amending the budget, we wanted to include anticipated revenues for 2 months that we hadn't collected, and they wouldn't let us. So they're not good on anticipation. They're better on what's in your rear view mirror. What have you already collected? If you want to amend your budget to include what you've already collected, then yes.
And so the 375, if I understand right, and I wish I was wrong, and I wish you were right, but it sounds like if you're saying that we we believe we're going to see more money than we thought we would, we've got to prove to DLG before we can get past them. We can't possibly do that without them saying, yes, we agree you did too, and I don't think they're going to. I don't think they got to have either past history to show it, some evidence that how we miscalculated, just saying that we think we were not as optimistic as we should have been. I just don't think
We can do that with our increase in the real estate tax. It's $200,000 more in real estate tax that I don't think we anticipated in the budget. I think we had the same amount basically in the budget for that. And then the clerk fees are already higher than what?
We've already spent that.
Were in the budget.
Clerk fees are in.
I know, but I think it's going to be higher than what we speculate based on the monthly average.
Well, all right, I'm DLG. Prove to me. Prove to me. What's the proof that we're getting ready to pay these folks a wage that they're going to rely on? What's the proof that we're going to have that money to support that?
The proof is there because the cash balance has increased from June 30th to August by a couple $1 million. There's proof that that revenue is coming in beyond what we
budgeted.
anticipated.
That's all in the budget.
We budgeted additional $360,000 for clerk's fees. We've collected through 7 months of this year 176, which means we're bringing in 25,000. So we're actually, while it is an increase in money over last year, it's $5,000 less than what we budgeted. Now, hopefully it'll catch up.
So
But it's not a windfall, right, Madam Treasurer?
if you hypothetically take 4%, you're going to get $170,000-$180,000. You're still $200,000 short. How are we going to prove to them we got that?
Well,
We're going to
that's
have to use it out of our
discretionary fund.
discretionary fund and then replace it with money. So why not pay the $320 or $375 out of the discretionary fund? And if we have to replace it with,
Well, the reason for that, I think, Jeff, is because it's recurring. I mean, because...
I understand, we're sitting here arguing over $170,000 or $80,000. Not 320, not 375.
We're talking-
We're going to come up with 200 either way.
That's right. That's right. We're going to come up with 200 either way. It's all recurring. If we do 375.
On the short term, when you move the budget by January 1, 375, you won't spend it all out by the end of the
Right.
year. So we won't quite need the full amount by June 30. But I guess we're going to have to look at that property tax issue.
And this budget didn't take into consideration the Genova sale, or did it? See, that's $100,000.
Wait a minute.
We got 200,000.
Hang on.
Pardon?
It's 50,000. It did take it into account. You're talking about the revenue, the payment we would have
Right.
had to make. It is in the budget, I think. We already took that out.
I don't think that was left for the first.
Well, I think we discussed that it's about a $50,000.
$50,000.
By the time you take out the rent and you take out the debt service we got rid of, it's about a net of $50,000 for the year to the good.
Because we lost the debt, but we lost the revenue too.
Let's set another, well, I don't know if we have to set another date right now, if y'all prepared to pick a date, but maybe in the, I don't know, what we need, another couple of weeks maybe to go through
The question
this?
I want to have answered, if the community is wanting to contact me, I think the answer I want is are you willing, yes or no, to pay an extra on a $100,000 house, are you willing to pay an extra 25 cents a month to keep the deputies secure and in their position and to raise the price of the jailer? Now, Bill mentioned the jailer is interested in paying $100,000 through the commissary fund. I want to get him on the record on that. That's the contract lawyer in me. You're committed on that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As long as commissary is putting in what it is,
As long as we do something, you're willing to put that in, and you're willing to sign an interlocal agreement so that we can budget that for a couple of years?
as long as commissary is putting that out.
I got you. I'm not going to make you go in the hole.
If the
Right.
state laws change and our commissary laws change, then I don't have control.
We'll build in some caveats.
Well,
Again, I'm repeating what I said previously, but I don't think giving them pay increases is contingent upon us increasing the real estate tax by 4%. We can do the increases that we want without increasing the real estate taxes. And I think our budget picture, we have a conservative budget and the revenues coming in above what our, I don't know if expenses are less, but our revenues coming in above what we have budgeted, and we can handle it without increasing taxes.
well,
Again.
that's optimistic. That's, what about Commissioner Parker? You feel the same way right at the moment, or?
At the moment, I do. I feel like we need another meeting. I hate to wait 2 weeks, so I'd like to get this behind us.
Well,
I think by law we have to wait.
To have another workshop?
no.
No. But
Yeah, I'm talking about a workshop.
we have to advertise the 4%.
Yeah, the public hearing
That's done.
has to be on September 28th.
Yeah.
That's your next regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah, okay. So we'll set something next week then?
Yep, as soon as possible.
Sure.
Okay. All right, we'll get something out on.
While we have you all here
Huh?
together, it'd be nice for Vicki if you knew, what day you're available next week.
That is,
If y'all would sit here for a minute, let me run and print the judge's calendar for next week, then I can come back and get with you.
Okay.
I can tell you that the only day I have available is Thursday.
It's a bad day for Bill.
I can't.
You can't do anything on
Thursday's a bad
Thursday.
day for me,
Can we do it at night,
unless we do it in late afternoon.
late
Oh,
afternoon?
well, I don't care.
I have a work commitment in Ohio for the 21st, 22nd. I'll be back on the 23rd, and I could potentially be back by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Is that what, 23rd?
What are we going to discuss our
Thursday,
next
Wednesday.
workshop? What's the topic of our next workshop? How much we're going to increase in salaries?
Yeah.
I think we
can-
put it to bed on the next workshop, where we can bring it to a vote on the following meeting.
Yeah.
Whether we
But
agree,
isn't it-
disagree, whatever, we're gonna know which way we're headed.
Isn't that the cart before the horse?
Whatever you wanna call it, I'm ready to get it over with.
I
I
mean,
wanna make a decision.
I mean, wouldn't it be better to make that decision after we've decided on the 4% or the 10% of the county tax?
I think the decision's made on the 4%.
Yeah, we've got 2 commissioners who are just not gonna
He said right
agree to that.
If you got something else, show me, I mean.
I thought we just did, but you think otherwise, so.
I mean, I guess
We'll
I'd rather do the salaries after the 28th. Because I'd like to know, if I'm making a decision, I want to know whether I'm spending $375,000 of our reserve, or am I spending $200,000 of our reserve?
Well,
While y'all are meddling all that around, a $2 increase isn't gonna fix my problem. I need a pay scale that is in place that keeps these people here, to see that there is more than a 2% increase over the next.
I agree with you. What you're saying is what we're talking about for pot number 1 is woefully insufficient. And I guess
I
what,
just don't want this to pass and say, here's $2 an hour, and that be the end of it. We still need an ordinance in place that was likely put in place in 2006.
my hope is that Bill is partially right, and there'll be a pot that we know is a pot in April, because we probably won't know it in April, that's when the tax return is due, but we'll know it after the tax
well,
return.
and if I understand right, you think we have 375 to put
I think
towards.
we have it right now.
Okay, 375 is what you believe we have to put toward raises.
There's nothing.
How far does that go? Across 3
That's what his
departments? And
recommendation is. And then
You haven't negotiated
his
yourself out of the
recommendation
pot too.
is to raise the tax.
I added you like cushion.
Well, we'll set a date for a workshop to talk about these things. I'm gonna be late for the airport.
Are we going to advertise for the 4%?
Yeah, we have.
4% of the 1%.
Who approved that?
I did.
Isn't that a fiscal court decision?
No, that's my decision. And I
10%,
made,
isn't it?
we need a
So
motion
it's
to
not a fiscal
adjourn.
court decision, I think.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye. Opposed, no. We adjourn.